In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to create your first macro in SoundFlow. For this example, let's create a simple macro to open the Pro Tools Playback Engine window. The manual steps we would take to open the Playback Engine would be to click the Setup menu in Pro Tools and choose Playback Engine, so our macro needs to be able to do that for us. In SoundFlow, all macros and scripts are stored in folders, or what we call packages. The first step is to select a package under the My Packages folder where you want to store your new macro. If you'd like to create a new package, you can do this by clicking the New button here and select Package. For now, I'll just use my default package, so I select it here, and then to create my macro, I click the New button in the top left section here and select Macro from the pop-up menu. We'll name this macro Open Playback Engine and press Return. When the macro is selected in the commands list here, the bottom right section becomes the macro editor where you can add actions. Actions are the building blocks of a macro. They define the individual steps that a macro should execute. The section above the macro editor is where you can assign triggers to your macro. A trigger in SoundFlow determines when a macro should run. For example, you can set your macro to be run whenever a keyboard shortcut is pressed, or when a MIDI event is received, or any other type of input that you set up. Now let's add an action to our new macro. You can do this by clicking the Add Action button here. This will open a list of actions we can choose from. There are two ways to find the actions we're looking for, either by going through the Actions category on the left or by searching. Since in this example we want to click a menu item, we can select the User Interface or UI folder, then the Menus and Pop-up Menus folder, and you can see the Click Menu Item action from the column here. Or perhaps easier, you can just start typing menu click, and then select the Click Menu Item action in the column with your arrow keys and press Return. In this case, finding the right action was easy, but we know there's a lot of different actions to learn, so if you have any questions about which one to use, please make sure to ask in the SoundFlow forum so we can guide you. Now that we've added a Click Menu Item action, we need to configure it so it does what we want. This action has two properties that can be set. Application, this is the app whose menu we want to click, and Menu Path, this is the path from parent menu down to submenu, describing which menu item should be clicked. So for application, we first need to select Pro Tools. Next, we need to enter the menu path. So let's switch to Pro Tools to investigate. As we can see here, the menu path will be Setup, followed by Playback Engine ... If your menu selection requires you to select submenu items, for example if you wanted to select Setup MIDI input devices, your menu path would consist of 3 steps. However, in our case it's just 2, Setup Playback Engine ... Oh, and please note, it's important to remember the exact spelling, capitalization and special characters of the menu path for the action to work correctly. So let's switch back to SoundFlow and in the Actions menu path property, enter the first step, Setup, then press Return. And then type Playback Engine ... and press Return. This particular action works even if Pro Tools is not in focus, so if we move the SoundFlow window over and click the Run Macro button here, there you have it. You can see, as expected, the macro opens the Playback Engine window. In this example, we're using just one action, but if you wanted to create a more complex macro, the macro editor allows you to add multiple actions by clicking the Add Action button here. The next step is to assign a keyboard shortcut to the macro. You can also have the macro triggered by any of the other trigger types, or assign it to a Stream Deck key, but we'll talk about that in another video. For now, let's assign a keyboard trigger by choosing New Trigger here and clicking Keyboard Trigger. To assign the shortcut we want, I'll click Record and press the keys Control, Option, Command and P. I also want to limit the keyboard shortcut so it doesn't override the shortcuts in other apps, so I'll assign the When these apps are focused property to Pro Tools. Now if we switch back to Pro Tools, we can use the shortcut and the Playback Engine window opens. And that's it! Now you have a working macro with a keyboard shortcut assigned to it. Now the macro we just created was a simple case of executing a single action. But if you need to build something with more complex logic, you can do that with a SoundFlow script. SoundFlow scripts are written in the JavaScript programming language. You can create a script by clicking New here and selecting Script. If you want to learn more about how to write scripts in SoundFlow, a great place to start is by making a macro like we just did and then using the Convert to Script button. This will create a copy that is essentially the script equivalent of your macro. You can then use this as a starting point to write script commands with countless possibilities. So to sum up, in this video we've learnt how to create a macro, how to add an action to a macro, how to configure action properties, how to add keyboard shortcut triggers to a macro, and how to convert a macro into a script using Convert to Script. Now if you have any questions or something's not working as expected, as always feel free to ask a question on our forum so we can help you out. Till next time, happy SoundFlowing.